Welcome back to Ocean Stories Podcast. My name is Lydia, and today we're going to be talking about an environmental crisis that's polluting our shores, endangering public health, and leaving entire communities cut off from the ocean. And this is an issue I've been wanting to talk about for forever because I moved to San Diego 1 year ago. So I guess I've been wanting to talk about it for 1 year, not forever. I'm a little dramatic. It's on the local news here sometimes, but I feel like it's something that deserves more national attention. And even living here, I'm surprised by how few people talk about it. For over 1,000 consecutive days, the beaches of Imperial Beach and parts of Coronado have been closed due to toxic pollution pouring into the Pacific Ocean from the Tijuana River. Every year, billions of gallons of untreated sewage, industrial chemicals, and trash flow across the U.S. Mexico border. This devastates marine ecosystems and it exposes the local residents to serious health problems and health risks. This crisis has been decades in the making. It's been fueled by government inaction and underfunded infrastructure on both sides of the border. So, what's being done to stop it? Why has this issue persisted for so long? Is there really billions of gallons of untreated sewage water entering U.S. waterways every year? Is that even true? Is this blown out of proportion? Is it blown under proportion? To help us break it all down and to understand this issue, which is very complex, I'm joined today by Patrick McDonough. He is a staff attorney at San Diego Coastkeeper. San Diego Coastkeeper is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to protecting and restoring San Diego's waterways through advocacy, science, education, and community engagement. And part of what they do is help to hold polluters accountable by enforcing environmental laws and fighting for clean water access for everybody. Part of this includes having lawyers and attorneys on their team that use legal and policy tools to tackle crises like the one we're talking about today. Patrick has spent a lot of years of his legal career fighting for environmental justice, and I was so grateful that he came on today to talk about what's at stake, what's really going on, and how we can push for real solutions to this issue. Now, if you are listening to this episode and at any time you feel a little bit overwhelmed or a little bit confused, I urge you to keep listening because the truth is that this is a very complex issue, as you will soon find out. There are a lot of governing bodies and nonprofits and political organizations and leaders, all with different interests and abilities and funding opportunities and laws they have to listen to. And so there are a lot of players in this complex problem. But in classic Ocean Stories style, we try to break it down in a way that is easy to understand, and so that hopefully at the end of this episode, you have a working understanding of the issue that you can walk away with. San Diego Coastkeeper is an amazing org. I've been following them pretty much since I moved here, and so I'll link everything about them, etc. in the show notes because they do organize cleanups and bird walks and other fun things in the area. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Patrick, to Ocean Stories. Thank you for joining. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk about, well, one little nook of what's affecting our oceans today.
Well, I'm really excited to learn more. This is something that I always see in the headlines, but I have to say I'm not the most educated on. So let's start on the ground. If someone were walking on the U.S. San Diego border or by a stream, by a creek, would they be able to see or experience anything that would let them know, hey, there's an issue going on with the water?
So I shouldn't laugh, but yes and yes. Yes, you can see things that are clearly disturbing, such as the color of water, which is gray or gray brown, or if it's raining, there is a tremendous amount of trash, sometimes tires, massive amounts of sediment coming through various creeks and canyons into the Tijuana River Valley. But you would also have a very visceral reaction of your olfactory senses because it smells atrocious. There is a lot of human waste mixed in with these flows. In some cases, they are just pure wastewater when it is not raining. Just think of dry weather that we have here in San Diego and in Tijuana, where it rains only a handful of days per year. Typically, it's less than 10 inches per year, but there is a constant flow of dry weather wastewater that is essentially leaking from Tijuana in various places. And because of the way the watershed is set up, that stuff just naturally flows into the United States and then eventually makes its way to the ocean near the southern border, and affects the beaches for quite a while, actually. We can talk about that a little later. So yes, you will see things, you will smell things. It is impacting people, fish, the environment, the quality of the water, plants, animals, macroinvertebrates, everything.
How did this happen? How did it get to this stage? What are some of the key events that have unfurled over time?
Great question. Yeah, let's take a step back and get into the history and the layout of things, and then we can dive a little bit deeper. So first, I like to explain that what a watershed is. Some people aren't familiar with that. I didn't learn that in school. But a watershed is an area of land, and imagine any drops of rain falling on that land, and it all has to flow somewhere. And the Tijuana watershed is massive. It's actually 1,750 square miles, and about a quarter of it is in the United States, and about 3/4 of it is in Mexico. But the powers that be during the end of the, Mexican-American War just drew a straight line right through that watershed. The end of the watershed is the Tijuana River estuary, which, by the way, is a Ramsar protected wetland. That is a designation for special, very important wetlands of international importance. Millions of birds along the Pacific Flyway depend on this area. Tons of fish, animals, and humans for millennia also rely on this area. So all of the water throughout the Tijuana River watershed ends up in that one area. It is in the United States. When the arbitrary straight line was drawn, they just chose the southern boundary along that lagoon and wetland. So everything that flows through Tijuana leaks out of it. Some stuff starts in the United States, flows into Mexico, and then comes back into the United States, all just along the border, but on the U.S. side. So that is painting the picture. And how did things get to be where they are today? Well, unfortunately, this has been a problem for a long, long time, since the 1930s, like not just 20 years, like, a century-ish. And the city of Tijuana has grown tremendously since that time, but also since the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s. The population of Tijuana in 1960, for example, was actually 154,000. And it grew to 2.3 million now. And that's the current population metropolitan area, but that has doubled since just the 1990s. So every time, there's just continuous growth in the city of Tijuana, the wastewater system continuously falls behind. And there's been a lot of international efforts to try and fix this problem, but it's always been a little bit too late. So the current system that we have in place on both sides of the border, both the U.S. and Mexico have an international treaty. The problem is that system was designed in the 90s, and the city of Tijuana, the population has doubled since then, and they keep exploding in growth. And things break, both on the U.S. side and the Mexico side, by the way. So there's all of those pumps and pipes and treatment plants on both sides, and just about every single piece of infrastructure on both sides has broken down sometime since 1997, where all of that stuff went online. And so we've been in a situation where beaches have been closed for well over 1,000 days, almost consecutively, but it has been a long-standing problem as all of these pieces of equipment are failing, and then raw sewage just leaks into the Tijuana estuary constantly. This is not just a problem when it rains. When it rains, it's much worse, and there's more sediment mobilization and trash that floods into the river valley, but there's just a constant leak of raw sewage that's completely untreated and bypassing in various areas and making its way into the poor Tijuana River, the estuary, and then into the ocean.
Well, there is certainly a lot of complexity in different things I want to ask about. I like how you talked about the line that was drawn and how that probably relates to the confusing aspects of how you're supposed to govern
It's created a
these
nightmare.
waterways that sort of just flow over the border. I also think it's interesting that you mentioned the infrastructure breaking on both sides. Why is the infrastructure always breaking? Like, can we
Oh
make
my
it better?
gosh. That is
Why
a
is it
giant can of
breaking?
worms.
Okay, okay. Is it something to do with like the mechanics, the engineering, or is it more of a social human issue?
I think money is a big part of it.
Okay.
So underfunding and neglect, sometimes just complete mismanagement, sometimes the two sides not talking to each other. I think Mexico has its own challenges with the financing and upkeep, and then some governmental institutional failures and corruption and things like that, which are additional hurdles to overcome. And then on the United States side, there's an agency called the IBWC, the International Boundary Water Commission, and that's an agency that was brought about by a treaty. And there's two sides to the IBWC, which we'll call it instead of the full mouthful. It's just another fun acronym. But there's the Mexican side of the IBWC, and then the U.S. side, which we refer to as U.S IBWC. And I should say a disclaimer quickly that Coastkeeper has sued the IBWC and private contractors for the federal government. The IBWC is a federal agency for certain Clean Water Act permit violations and failures. For a number of years, this goes back a ways, that agency was not run very well. I can give some good news as well, saying things have significantly improved. And I love to say that that's part of the point of the litigation and bringing more attention to this matter is to fix things, right? But IBWC, I don't want to put a date stamp on it, but let's just say 5 to 20 years ago, didn't have that much funding, but I don't think they did a very good job of asking the federal government for more money. And then they would just let things fall apart, and there was deferred maintenance. So they say, oh, well, we don't have that in the budget. We'll fix that pump another day. We'll worry about this pipe some other time. There's a lot of sophisticated infrastructure to run a wastewater treatment plant. I now know way more than I ever cared to know about treating sewage, but it's important. Otherwise, there would just be sewage everywhere. Things broke down over time, and I think part of it was Tijuana growing and adding more and more and more pressure to an older system that was failed to be maintained properly. I think in 2023, it was a real low point of, we had a big, almost a hurricane, but a tropical storm come through it that summer, which is a massive anomaly. Thank you, climate change. Probably a topic for another day, but something that we're probably going to be seeing more regularly. And it strained the treatment plant on the U.S. side and all of the infrastructure. So many parts were about to completely be destroyed because they were clogged or needed replacing, or they were humming and only operating at 50% capacity. 4 of 4 of this type of pump was down, and 2 of 7 of these type of grip chambers was working. And so the whole plant was about to collapse because of the lack of funding and proper maintenance to keep it going. We've seen significant improvements since then, as I alluded to, but that kind of paints a picture of how did we get here? What's going on? Why are things breaking?
That was so useful for me to understand. Like, you got 5 government agencies, you got all these nonprofits, you got 2 different countries, you got all these international agreements and treaties and policies and all of these things. And then you have the actual people that are not a part of any of that and are, I'm assuming, being negatively affected by all of this.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how people in Tijuana and in San Diego, you mentioned Imperial Beach, are being impacted by this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Before that, I did to put a little more detail into all of the different agencies and folks involved to try and fix this problem. It's not just Mexico IBWC and U.S IBWC. The actual map of the jurisdictions include the city of San Diego, the county of San Diego, which is different, IBWC, Department of Homeland Security, because you have Border Patrol monitoring a lot of this area, and they actually own and manage some of those lands. California state parks, other state lands, other federal jurisdiction, like the Navy has some jurisdiction in this area as well. And folks like Navy SEALs and their training ground are impacted. That's just the agencies involved in the Tijuana River Valley. It is a nightmare. So getting all of them on the same page is not fun. And Coastkeeper, sorry, I'm the attorney for San Diego Coastkeeper. I should also note, this is just me, Patrick, and my opinions, not necessarily the views of the organization San Diego Coastkeeper. But We have been a facilitator between some of those agencies. Getting into answering your question about how this impacts people. Yeah, let's start with the folks in the southern areas, the South Bay communities, especially Imperial Beach and the community in San Isidro. Imperial Beach has been rocked by this, what has been viewed as a water pollution issue for many years. They've closed beaches on and off for many, many, many years, going back even a decade before things were as bad as they are today. Right now, there's about 10 to 20 million gallons of raw sewage that's just flowing through the main stem of the Tijuana River every day into the river valley and then into the ocean. And then the ocean currents take it up and down the coast, kind of depending on the swell direction and seasonality. But those currents can take just raw sewage, essentially, up the coastline to Coronado. A lot of people have probably heard that the beach is in Coronado, which has this, the famous Hotel del Coronado and a very famous pristine looking beach. And it is closed. It's not even, hey, swim at your own risk. This is an advisory. This is way too dangerous. No one is allowed to go in the water because of the levels of pathogens and viruses and human bacteria that is in the water. And then they're considering closing. Breaking news, hot off the press. They are considering closing all shellfish harvesting, commercial operations anyway, all the way up to La Jolla Cove, including all of San Diego Bay, because shellfish are filter feeders and they're consolidating all of those pollutants in their tissue. You don't want to poison the population with God knows what. There's stuff like norovirus out there. There's a lot of research being done on the harmful effects of the various viruses and pathogens. We know there's a lot of bacteria. What else is actually in this water? This is also a less white, less affluent area. So this is a huge environmental justice catastrophe. Like, I'm a white guy who lives up in North County, so I don't presume to speak on behalf of this community. Some of the latest studies are showing that if you smell something, something's wrong, but that also means the chemicals or pathogens or viruses are in the air. That's how it got into your nostrils. Some of the smells have been so bad that the San Diego Air Pollution Control District actually issued notices of violation to U.S IBWC for odors specifically. There's a bridge in the middle of the Tijuana River Valley on Saturn Boulevard. It's the Saturn Bridge. If you walk across that, it will make your eyes water. And it's very hard to breathe because the water kind of goes under the road through these pipes. And then there's a drop off. So it creates this waterfall and it foams up the water and splashes. The prevailing wind pattern in San Diego is onshore, right? And it blows all of that stuff eastward into folks who breathe it in every day and every night. And more people are complaining of headaches. Folks at UCSD are collecting more data on this, and San Diego State University, specifically their School of Public Health. Coastkeeper works closely with some of those professors, and they're out there with air quality monitors and collecting a lot more data and collecting or doing a lot more studies to find out, okay, how bad is this really? And how bad is this to breathe in at night? Folks who live down there have to shut their windows. The Coastal Commission is giving away air purifiers to these communities because it's dangerous to just exist. Not even going to the beach. You're not trying to surf. You're just trying to live your life, and you're being exposed to who knows what just by breathing. So it is a very bad situation. I don't know. That's probably understating it tremendously, but more and more information will come out as to what's going on in the coming months and years.
So many interesting aspects of this situation. One being what you mentioned about how San Diego is I've only lived here for a year, so I can't say that this represents all of San Diego, so I'm sorry to fellow San Diegan people, but it's like there's these different pockets of it, and some of them are extremely affluent and very high income. And I don't know if they know that this is going on. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it's crazy that 30 minutes away, there's this crazy health issue going on because of an environmental disaster, basically. It also kills me because you always learn about, even in elementary school, you learn about these past environmental disasters. Like, I'm trying to think, maybe I need to go back to elementary school, but there's one where everyone was living next to a factory. And then 60 years later, everyone had this specific lung disease. And, these types of situations where nobody really knew at that moment. Maybe some people knew, but there wasn't a broad awareness of, in that moment, these people might end up having health complications down the line. And they teach you that in school so that you learn, oh, okay, like I should, hopefully in our earth, if this happens again, we are not going to have 60 years pass and then we find out, oh, there were these disease causing things in the air. And so it's frustrating to hear about a situation like that's going on right now that people know about and people are researching. And obviously you wish you could wave a magic wand and just fix the problem. And I know it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah. Don't let me end the podcast without talking about the positive stuff, the actual improvements that we've seen.
Okay.
I think you hit the nail on the head that this is a crisis. This is a human health and environmental crisis. And no, I don't know of another similar situation in the United States. Like you had the Flint, Michigan lead exposure crisis, but that has been kind of dealt with. It's continually being remedied right now. It's not like they just waved a magic wand and fixed things. So you were asking earlier, what's going on with this emergency, and Coastkeeper and a lot of other organizations and community leaders. I want to give credit to Paloma Aguirre, the mayor of Imperial Beach, who is also a coastal commissioner, who has been just sounding this alarm for quite a long time and requesting both the federal government declare this a state of emergency, which would release additional funding and it would speed up the process. But it's still going to take many years to build better infrastructure and improve all of these things. And those same groups and organizations have also been asking Governor Newsom to declare a state of emergency for similar reasons. Neither have, which is frustrating. I feel like people have gotten numb to this because it's been going on for years, but yeah, make no mistake, this is a horrible, horrible situation. And these folks are just forced to live there. But I feel like if we could get some more senior officials to stand on Saturn Bridge and take a couple breaths and then like, okay, this is just astounding that this exists. I forgot to mention, like you brought up folks in Mexico as well. This absolutely affects people throughout the greater Tijuana area. There's actually about 50 million gallons of raw sewage that is pumped and just dumped directly into the ocean. Like it trickles down a cliff and then goes right onto the beach every day. Like 50 million gallons of raw sewage every single day. They're rebuilding one of the wastewater treatment plants. It's about 5 miles south. It's near Baja Malibu. Don't ever surf there, please. Like I know people who still go down to this area. It's like Punta Bandera. It is so dangerous, pathogens and bacteria and whatnot that we mentioned before. The new wastewater treatment plant in Mexico is going to treat 18 million gallons per day, but the overall volume that needs to be treated is still 50. That's not going to change. So the long-term solutions are still not in place. They've received a lot of funding to double the capacity of the international treatment plant to the tune of about $600 million. So in that regard, things are improving, which we haven't seen in many, many years since they built all this new infrastructure in 1997. You can't access the beach. It's impacting your air quality for folks all over Tijuana and the southern communities in the United States.
And that is exactly why I wanted to talk about this on Ocean Stories, because it's a human issue and an environment issue, but it's a perfect example of when they come together, right? Because it's like for people that don't have access to the beach where they live, let's imagine for a moment that the air quality thing wasn't a thing. Okay, well, that's also a huge...
Right.
I don't want to say disaster when you're comparing it to like literally not being able to breathe, but that is a problem. That is a problem for conservation, but it's also a problem for just enjoyment, life, equality of access to beach recreation.
Yeah. It's like the human right to water. Just like, really? We can't just go to the beach? And waves, by the way, aerosol these things as well. So even just walking along the beach becomes more dangerous. It's crazy. It is a huge disaster on so many fronts.
And all of that has a trickle effect on how people think and view the environment and the ocean. I'm kind of understanding now where your brain is at with the a million different things going on, because there's 100 different ways that we could take this conversation that would all be equally as interesting and probably as saddening. You mentioned there were some positive things. You mentioned some money coming. That's really interesting and good. Anything else positive?
Oh, man.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah. So before I jump into all the positives, because this is, I kind of didn't talk about this other specific issue. So yes, there's leaky wastewater all over the place coming into the United States. When it does rain, it scours a lot of the urban environment. right now there's one huge construction project going on in Mexico where they're building a double-decker freeway right along the border fence. And when you're disturbing that amount of sediment and it rains, it mobilizes sand and trash and all of those other pollutants that you don't want. And they come down in those canyons. Now, in the U.S., this is where like the city and the county and other jurisdictions come in. The county of San Diego has responsibility for maintaining one of these canyons. This one's called Smuggler's Gulch. So if you see that in the news, Smuggler's Gulch, like there may be dry weather wastewater flows coming in. But I've toured that place a few times, and every time it rains, it just creates this sediment and trash sandwich. And apparently that has been happening for 17 years without any maintenance. It's not in the county of San Diego's budget to clean out Smuggler's Gulch. They finally got a grant or some funding and did it. But before they were able to dig out, and because the gulch and the way the water is supposed to flow into the Tijuana River and then meet up and kind of be diluted and go to the ocean, that whole gulch just filled up with sand and trash. And then it breached a levee and ended up flooding neighboring like private property in a field with just wastewater. And it smelled awful. And then it was just ponding there. So you just imagine raw sewage ponding in your yard. In this case, it was a big like kind of horse farm facility. And it also flooded a brand new County of San Diego campground that was supposed to be on this beautiful estuary. They finally have been able to clean that out. The city of San Diego was then in charge of repairing the berm. That is fixed. So now we're getting into some of the positives. But like, please don't let that happen again where you don't manage this for 17 years and you get this infinite trash sediment sandwich. Also some trash capture devices upstream and better management on the Mexico side for their construction projects. That would all help these situations. Okay, so Smuggler's Gulch has been repaired. It's pretty insane, the images, because they're digging it out and then they're separating the contaminated sediment from the trash. And there's just giant piles of tires, plastic, crazy amounts of debris. And then they have to landfill that. On the funding side, the federal government has given about $600 million to the U.S IBWC to fix all of the broken infrastructure and then double the size of the treatment plant. So right now, that treatment plant's capacity is about 25 million gallons per day, and they want to expand that to 50, which would help in managing all of that leaking wastewater from Tijuana. I said, there's 50 that's just going right into the ocean. That's 50 plus the 25 that we're already managing on the U.S. side. We would like something even larger, to be honest, because that Tijuana is probably going to continue to grow. We're still going to get leaking wastewater from various places. It's nice to have some significant progress launching these new projects forward to significantly improve things on the U.S. side to help better manage and prevent further catastrophes. But in the meantime, raw sewage is going to continue flowing.
I'm thinking of so many things like city planning and just where humans are supposed to live, and also climate change making it rain more here, and just how the weather patterns are going to change in the next 50 years. But then there's also like an economic aspect of, San Diego and Tijuana, and just, I don't know, there's just so many different interesting things to talk about when it comes to this.
It is super multifaceted. And that's what's made it such a challenge for so many years as well.
That's what I was going to say, that what I really like about the way that you've explained it is it kind of helps me understand the scale and how big and complex of an issue that it is, which is probably why a lot of people in San Diego who aren't being, directly impacted sort of just go about their lives as if it's not happening. But it is an issue that's affecting like our community.
Absolutely.
And it is just wild to think of how many people, including me, can just go to my beach. I mean, I still sometimes check the water.
Yeah, you should. The water quality,
yes,
reports,
exactly.
Yeah.
I Google, can you swim at Ocean Beach today? But even still, like, I don't have the same type of concerns. And so I don't know. I guess I don't want to ask this because I'm scared the answer's no. But I want to know, like, for regular people, what should we be doing? Like, should we be talking more about it? Should we be, like, rallying? What can normal, people do, if anything?
Yeah. No, there's plenty of things we can do. So some outlet for this, for your frustrations. Staying engaged with the various regulatory processes, because on the U.S. side, there's a lot of permits that regulate IBWC and their infrastructure. There's the Coastal Commission. There's the San Diego Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is the agency here in San Diego that is tasked with issuing and updating and then enforcing and managing Clean Water Act permits here in our region. And IBWC does have a Clean Water Act permit. They're not allowed to just let their stuff break. That's kind of, and let the water discharge from their facilities and flow into the Tijuana River Valley or the ocean. That's the basis of our lawsuit. There were other lawsuits that came before us. The City of Imperial Beach, actually the Regional Water Quality Control Board itself, the Port of San Diego, City of San Diego, the Surfrider Foundation. They sued in 2018, and that led to a settlement in 2022. So kind of giving them some credit at shining a spotlight on this problem. That was one of the pressure points that got IBWC to conduct that assessment of their infrastructure. They got the $300 million. They said, hey, we're going to upgrade our plant. And then lo and behold, unfortunately, it was going to cost $150 million to fix things. They are routinely monitored by the Coastal Commission and by the regional board, the short name for the Regional Water Quality Control Board, at their monthly meetings. And those are public meetings, and they invite public comment. So asking more questions, listening, all of those are available via video and Zoom. You can submit written comments. You can just give a general public comment if there's not an agenda item for those meetings specifically related to this issue. You can still talk about it. You can still keep it in front of those regulating bodies to let those decision makers know, hey, the public cares about this, and they listen. A lot of the times it's like Surfrider Foundation and Coastkeeper and our partners over at Coastal Environmental Rights Foundation. It's very impactful when, I don't want to say regular folks, but people who are not a part of our organizations call in or go in person to the meeting and get up there and get their 2 or 3 minutes to say their piece. It pushes those decision makers to use more resources to look further into this or to apply greater pressure to the IBWC. So that's one thing. Surfrider Foundation and some other organizing groups, they also hold vigils. They organize around this issue and get a few hundred people to do a candlelight protest. There's a lot of ways to plug in and get involved. You can sign up for Coastkeeper's newsletter. We talk about this issue all the time. We're doing more blog posts. And then, yes, having conversations like this. We do presentations in these various communities about how those communities can more directly get involved and have their voices heard. There's a lot of Spanish speakers in these communities. I love plugging the public into action in any way that you can.
Me too. And I appreciate that breakdown because I think it's useful. And it's a good reminder to follow those organizations on social media or sign up for their newsletters or however you get information to stay up to date with what's going on. And, next weekend, there might be some way that you can plug in that fits within your schedule. It's just good to stay in the loop with the updates with these things.
That's a good point as well. Like, it's very dynamic. This situation is always changing. Every month there's sometimes like 2 steps forward, sometimes 2 steps back, and sometimes just a new problem altogether that we weren't aware of. The communication has significantly improved, and the level of urgency on both sides has significantly improved in the past 2 years. So I'm encouraged by that, at least.
Some is better than none.
Yes.
And we have to stay positive somehow.
Yeah, it's good for the mental health.
Yeah. We didn't get into explicitly your work with Coastkeeper or a current update with how that's going on. Do you want to briefly explain that aspect of things, or is it too difficult to briefly explain?
I'll stay very brief. First of all, we're conducting monthly sampling down in the Tijuana River Valley, just water quality in the main stem of the river and in a couple of the canyon collectors when they're flowing. And we're just trying to find out how bad the stuff, like we know it's polluted, but we're trying to test for PCBs and other like toxic or chemical pollutants that have been banned in the United States to see the level of how would this potentially impact the estuary and of course humans. No one's really been doing that consistently. And we're also partnering with San Diego State and UCSD and the EPA to find out, okay, what are you all sampling for? So there's not as much overlap. We're all trying to attack this from a public health and environmental health perspective to get air quality samples, water quality samples. And then on the litigation side, yeah, this would bore people, but we're actively litigating with the U.S IBWC, and this is a federal court case if you want to follow along with any of the like motions practice, but I don't think anybody else would really care about that here.
I think it would be good to know for people who have no idea what it even means that you can just litigate. Like, what do you mean, like, you can just, that would be interesting to hear.
So credit to the folks who drafted the Congress, who drafted the Clean Water Act. They deputized the public and allowed for something called citizen suits for violations of the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act basically says you can't discharge pollutants into certain water bodies. You've probably heard of WOTUS, or Waters of the United States, because it's in the news a lot, but you can't discharge pollutants into a WOTUS without a permit from a point source specifically. And all of those terms are very well defined. But it said, you know what? The public, you can sue for when you see violations of this. If you are affected, you can sue to enforce the Clean Water Act. Now, you don't get $1 million for being injured. That's like, torts law. Citizen suits just say, no, yeah, you are violating your permit, or you're discharging pollutants without a permit, which is also illegal. And you can get a judge to enforce that via injunctive relief to prevent such discharges. And then if there are like civil penalties attached to that, those penalties and financial stuff, that goes to a pot in the federal government. Non-profit groups like Coastkeeper can still bring case against IBWC to try and get a ruling from a judge that says you have to do this, not just the enforcement agency. And then presumably, even if IBWC doesn't do it, then they would be in contempt of court. And that is a whole different can of worms. So that's the potential legal consequences that are on the line here. And then there's also the practical reality of, since we filed this litigation, IBWC's really been getting their act together. I was giving the example of four out of 4 of these pumps were broken, and 2 of 7 of these grit chambers were full. All of those have been fixed. Now 4 of 4 pumps are totally operating and they're great. And then all of the grit chambers have been cleaned out and they're operating great. Oh, wow. That's amazing. So litigation is multifaceted as well. It is one tool in the toolbox. And as I mentioned, Coastkeeper we're advocating in front of all of these other regulatory agencies and policy and decision makers, the city of San Diego, the county, working directly with other organizing groups, and then going down there and getting involved in the science aspect as well. All of those things are connected in our effort to try and improve the situation in any way we can. It's hard, but litigation's just one piece of that. Was that helpful without getting too nerdy?
No, it was a really good breakdown. It made me understand more of how the Clean Water Act can protect us, and I'm sure other acts. It made me wish maybe that there was more of this. It's interesting because you never know if there's someone listening right now who is interested in environmental law. So maybe this was like a little intro for them. Yeah. I think that they would really enjoy hearing just a brief breakdown of that type of work.
I enjoy it. I'm very fortunate. This is my dream job. I get to sue polluters and then also work on the policy side of things. Just this morning, I was out in the field picking up plastic pellets. It's involved with another case that I won't go into right now. So you kind of wear a lot of different hats, and working for a nonprofit is dynamic and fun and interesting, and you're making a difference. I sleep very well at night knowing that I get to do this. It's not as lucrative as maybe some other positions. That's the downside. But if you're thinking about it, give me a call. I'm happy to speak with folks about how I ended up in this position and kind of what my career path was and what I did in law school, that whole thing. It's different for everybody, but it's always a fun conversation.
It's amazing. Thank you for saying that. And I'm very grateful to have had your time and to have you come on and explain these things, because this is exactly what I wanted to learn more about. I'm really excited to share this information. And also thanks to you and your whole team for always fighting the good fight. There is a trade-off. Sometimes I'm sure you want to ram your head into a wall with these things. And it's just, what helps me sleep at night is knowing that there are people whose full-time job it is to work on these sorts of things and to think about them. Smart people, that put their time and energy towards these types of issues. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Thank you. And there's a lot, that's a great positive way to close this out. There are a lot of other people that are working very hard on this as well. So always a good reminder.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Ocean Stories. Don't forget to follow our social media channels for extra content behind the scenes and to connect with our guests. If you like this episode, please leave a review and let us know what you think. See you soon for more Ocean Stories.